we're more fascinated now with box office numbers than the actual substance of a story. Hi, and welcome to Storia, where storytellers disrupt. I'm David Noronha.
And I'm Fabiano Altamura.
And before we dive in, please remember to like, subscribe, download, and give us that 5-star review. So what are we exploring here on part 2?
Well, this is part 2. So I'm asking, you're in the director's chair now. So I want to ask you, I know you've done a lot more TV than you've done theater. When it comes to directing, because I know we both love performing. I wonder, now we've got to our age where we'd probably say we may.
What do you mean by our age? That sounds
well,
kind of
your
derogatory.
age. Then you're a lot older than I am, considerably. Evidently, by the way I look and by the way you look.
But I'm taller.
Wow. Where do you feel like you enjoy? Because obviously, Bright Ones, documentaries and stuff that you've directed. Yeah. Do you enjoy directing film or theater more? And let me know why in each.
That's a good question, man. I had not directed theater for, goodness gracious, man, I can't remember. I mean, I think the first and the last time that I had directed theater was the first production that I directed, which was Fame in high school.
Oh, wow. You directed in high school.
I did. Cool. I directed in high school. It was an awkward story. My girlfriend at the time, she actually was the one who was set to direct, but she was also in the piece. I was not in this piece. I had just done The Fantastics, which had changed the course of my life. That's where I discovered my love of acting and so on and so forth. For second semester in my senior year, they were going to do Fame the musical. And she was supposed to direct, but she started to get overwhelmed, and so I increasingly stepped in. And then at one point, she was just like, "Hey, listen, why don't you direct? Because I don't think I can juggle both." And I was not very well liked. I was a tremendous punk and incredibly dictatorial.
You? I can't imagine that side of you.
The young, testosterone-riddled, broken version of me. So I came in there just guns a-blazing, and I mean, we got it done. But let's just say there's some casualties along the way. But that was my first experience, and I did enjoy it. I don't know if people enjoyed me, but I did enjoy kind of putting the story together. And my teachers trusted me, and so on and so forth. I don't think I directed theater again until literally just a few months ago when I did.
Well, Paradise Lost.
Yeah, that's true. So Paradise Lost was a concert version of an opera that Eric Whitaker and I had written. And we did different concert versions of it. But, concert versions are like, we've got music stands, we've got a chorus, but there wasn't a lot of like blocking or stuff like, but you're absolutely right.
I thought you did it didn't you do it in Pasadena?
No, we did it. No, Eric did another production once the rewrite happened where that was a different production.
Okay.
The last one that I directed would have been at Disney Hall.
Okay.
Where we had a chorus of like 300 or 400 singers. Mm-hmm. There was electronica, orchestral. We had opera singers. I mean, it was Disney Hall. We also did it in Chicago. We did a version in Berlin, but it was pretty much like this concert version of the piece. So we didn't really have sets and we typically would put them up in a day or so. That was exhilarating because being in a space like Carnegie Hall and all that stuff was stunning. It was amazing.
I can imagine. Wow.
But it was a lot of pressure as well. Those spaces are incredibly expensive. I mean, I think it cost us $250,000 a day at Carnegie Hall or something like that. We weren't paying, and working with unions, that was unique. I mean, you literally couldn't touch a music stand because it was somebody else's job to move the music stand. And this is in New York. So when you're talking about unions, you're not just talking about the union. You're probably talking about La Familia.
Right.
So anyway, that was an experience. It wasn't until Little Women that I got to get my hands back with actors.
Right. And Little Women, just explain to the audience that. So Little Women, you put on at Christmas. It was the first show you directed with the current seniors.
Yeah, and the first thing I directed, I mean, other than some of the film stuff that I directed at BCA.
At BCA, and how did you find it? Like, what did you
see? That's the thing, back to your original question, like, which do I prefer? I think Little Women was definitely one of the most profound experiences for me. And I think it goes back to what you said in part one of this. If you didn't get to listen to part one. where you talked about performing in the presence. And I think I could like amplify that out to what it feels like to just create with God and with other believers in a space that is set apart for him.
Right.
Because I think it's Claire, your wife, who's really laid out this idea of the studio being a sanctuary. And, you know, that hasn't been and hadn't been my experience in some of the other spaces. You know, and so being in a space where we really set that apart on a daily basis, we took the theater and Kerwin and some of our production team would actually have worship playing there all the time. Creates an atmosphere where it's not like inviting God. It's like you're stepping into his presence, into his sanctuary every day when we were rehearsing. And then to boot, you take 8 of the most sweetest, kindest, glorious young artists, our senior actors from Bethel Conservatory. And the culture and the vibe in the space was just so conducive for depth and beauty and everything else that for me, that was really special, man. I think it stands apart as singular in my creative experience.
Wow, that's amazing, dude. I love hearing you say that. Now, when you go from saying, because you've got such a diverse resume of directing, right? How would you say directing Little Women differed from directing, say, for example, Bright Ones?
So theater, the beauty of theater, though you usually have less money, I mean, I think Bright Ones, you know, was over $1 million at the end of the day. That wasn't our working budget, but at the end of the day, that's probably what we didn't feel $1 million.
I think it went way north.
It went way north as we decided to take it from a 45-minute long short film to a feature film. And there were a lot of reasons why that increased. And because, film's expensive. So it's $1 million. It sounds incredibly shiny, but it was as bootstrappy as anyone could get. I mean, we
didn't look it though.
No, it didn't. And that's a testimony to Drew Mall, our director of photography, and the crew, Toby and all the guys, and Ryan, who did post-production on that. So we had amazing sous chefs that were in there just polishing this thing. But in theater, you're in a room with 8 people. There's less pressure in a way because rehearsing theater, what a lot of people may or may not understand about film is if you have rehearsal, it's very little before, somewhere in a room that doesn't look anything like where you're going to shoot. And that's like if you're doing an action sequence or something like that. I mean, in most of my experience, I've never rehearsed anything. Literally, you rehearse on set, you go, you get your makeup done, you come back, you shoot. So the sense of urgency in a film is not for the faint of heart. And I had never directed anything as big in my career as Bright Ones. So imagine that every day you're showing up. I was typically there with the crew at the crack of dawn, 5 a.m., sometimes earlier if we were shooting out in location and we wanted to make sure that we would make our day, which means to shoot everything that you thought you were going to shoot. We would have dozens of kids, none of which could work longer than a total of 8 hours, including lunch, and they would have to study on set. So, and we, like you said, we had animals and so on and so forth. So the sense of pressure, and also that I felt at the time that there was something that I desperately wanted to prove because I wanted to be able to direct more films. I wanted to be able to direct more films for Bethel and for Bethel Music, who was the producing entity of that film. I think for me, at the end of the day, I was super exhausted. I was really, really exhausted. Part of that was that we didn't have sufficient crew and stuff, not as a critique, it's just the limitation of the budget.
Limitations of it.
Every day on Little Women, I was just excited.
Juiced.
Yeah.
You looked excited, but I must admit though, just for people that may not have seen or experienced you working, but I always felt there was a tremendous piece still on Bright Ones.
My wife says the same thing. She says she describes back to, which by the way, if you know me, and you know, Fab and I will often joke about this. I can be an intense person, and I don't always come across.
I don't think I've ever experienced it. Whatever. I haven't always in the history.
I think we're both really going through a journey here where we're trying to become the men that we've wanted to be. But in my past, I have not always been a peaceful person. But my wife has described to me that when I direct, there is this I slow down the way that I speak. And the thing about it is, I can honestly tell you that I'm not putting it on. So I almost wonder sometimes, we talk a lot about the fivefold ministry, the apostle, the prophet, the pastor, and my view of being a director is of being a pastor.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Right? Because, and I had the privilege of working with Fab. Fab was one of the actors on Bright Ones, and I just saw it recently, and I always so enjoyed you. Still, there's these moments with the other teacher that were improvised by you that would just totally always make me laugh. A, because they're you, but just because they're so good. They're so genuine. But my job with you or with any actor, was just like Danny says in relationship counseling, just to lower anxiety.
Yeah.
Because if you're calm and you're relaxed on set, I'm going to get this playful, improvisational, all the texture and the stuff starts to come to the surface. And so I wonder sometimes if, as a director, whenever we step into these roles, if there's a kind of grace from God that kind of comes over.
And you're in your lane, aren't you? Because you're a very good director, and I love the way you direct.
Thanks, man.
For you, what is your angle when you come in? Like we talked in part one, I need an angle or an edge around it. What is yours? Do you have one, or does it dictate to by the piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think much like you. I mean, I think when you in part one talked about the crucible and how you read the tea leaves, so to speak, of the piece, or you look at the text, you look at the story, you do your homework, right? So, I mean, any responsible director, I think you got to first understand what the author was saying, right? Whether we're approaching the Word of God, I don't want to rock up with just my ideas. There might be an angle to my preach. There might be something that I want to lift to focus for the congregation or the cast. But I always want it to come from the text first. And I think that's right. You and I think because we come from an acting background, we always go to the text first. But I think, any storyteller should start with what was on the page. So I start with the text. Then I think, like you, though I think we naturally, because we have different sensitivities and aesthetics and stuff, but I do try to find the concept of the piece. So for Little Women, in this particular version of Little Women, the writer, Louisa May Alcott, was actually the protagonist of the piece, as I saw it. And so I thought to myself, if she's the protagonist of the piece, but she's writing it as we're seeing it, then where are we? Where am I that she's here and I'm seeing her characters? Well, the only place that's possible is inside her imagination. Yeah. The only place where both author and the creator and the creative is in that space of the imagination. So I envision the theater as the inside of Alcott's imagination. So I go text, and then I go concept. And then I think, like you, I go towards those dynamics, the reality of each scene or piece of it. And I just want to try to find the humanity. How can I get these two actors to connect and bring this thing to life, Yeah.
And I think being a director is seeing two actors bring the words on the page to life.
At the end of the day, that's what the audience is looking at.
That's what the audience is looking at. And I think sometimes as a director, you have no idea how the piece is going to be received until you get an audience in the house. You're like, I try to get a laugh on that line, and it doesn't land. And then lines where you do not think there's any humor in whatsoever, you get laughs. And I think that's the organic piece that's the organic nature of a piece, right?
And by the way, 100%. And by the way, it changes every night.
Every night, yeah.
Because then you think, oh, okay, well, that wasn't funny. That was funny, so on and so forth on Saturday, on Saturday afternoon, on Saturday night.
Right.
Because I think the audience, and I think this is the beauty of live theater, the audience is that third character.
Right.
The audience is that other component, right? I mean, theatrical pieces are not meant to just be watched by the crew. So yeah, man.
So that's the difference between live theater and film, then, because as a director, when you're sat in the audience, you're up front. You get to feel all the feels. In the theater, you might get to see it 4 or 5 times in theaters and then not know or get any feedback other than on Rotten Tomatoes what people are thinking about the piece.
You say tomato.
Sorry. On Rotten Tomatoes. So you know what I mean? You just don't get that beautiful experience. So if you were to say which would be your preference, what do you like directing more, or in your experience, what has been the most profound for you?
Gosh, man, that's a really hard one to answer. I don't think I could choose. I don't know that I would want to choose any more than I want to choose in my acting career. I mean, as actors, to some extent, we do what we're offered, and we do what and for me, that's often been television. I think the exciting thing about the visual stuff, the film and the TV stuff, is that there are certain things that I think visual storytelling can do. And I say visual storytelling, it's a term that we use in screenwriting to delineate, film and television, what we call film and television. Of course, we see in both, but yeah. I would argue that theater is about the playwright. And also, to some extent, it's the actor's medium, because once the actors step out on stage, it's really theirs. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think in film, it's the director's medium, because you can actually shape the piece. So I think there's things that I enjoy about both. I think what I enjoy about live theater is that it's live. Every night is different. As an actor, without a doubt, the more enjoyable is live on stage. Because you get that electricity from the audience. Mm-hmm. Film can feel sometimes like you're alone. And you certainly are not getting any laughs from the crew, because then it's on the track. It's it's on the soundtrack. So I think what film does really well sometimes is, and maybe a little bit better, is a form of subtlety and nuance that I enjoy, that sometimes theater, certainly if you're in a bigger space with a big audience, it's, you don't get that. But then on the other side, again, what you get with the bigger theatrical stuff is a kind of athleticism and muscularity and size, which is also enjoyable.
Yeah, the energy is different. From a performance point of view, the energy is different. But I tell you what as well, there's nothing like being on your mark and just waiting when you feel you get the light on your face, they're about to go action. There's nothing like that.
This is why I built you the studio, man. There's actually nobody listening. It's just I just wanted you to feel the light.
Oh, dude, there's just nothing like that. So from now then, like what would you like to see in your directing career? What would be next for you? Like what scratch have you got to itch? What scratch have you got to itch? No. What itch have you got to scratch? I'm performing for my scratch, not from it. No, go on.
Man, you're asking me at a really unique time. I mean, I think I feel, for the moment at least, I think I feel satiated by Little Women. I think that filled a bucket that I had forgotten that even existed in me. I think it actually brought me a lot of healing, not just around directing, but around an affection for acting and actors. Because I think I have to confess that I had become a bit cynical. I'd become a bit cynical about actors, about the species, a little bit of our self-involvement, the narcissism component, the celebrity component. My definition of success, which still to this day is probably informed by my pursuit of a career in television. But I think directing those 8 actors, our seniors, such a beautiful group of kids in this tiny little theater where there was like 60 seats, reminded me of what it really means and what its real purpose is, and just art.
I know. It's like cool. It's cool because people go, well, what is art? But it's like, it's satisfying.
Well, the thing is, man, is I know, because we're living in a moment now where it's all about ratings and commercialism, and we're so I feel like we're more fascinated now with box office numbers than the actual substance of a story.
Piece. Like, look at any Marvel, and this may be controversial, but like,
I think they can handle it. I think they're okay.
Fell asleep in Black Panther, bored out of my mind. A lot of the other Marvel things, I'm just like
Doctor Strangelove. I literally have
Doctor
not
Strange.
made whatever.
Strangelove. Strangelove is Bond. It's kind of it. I don't know, dude. I'm like I'm bored because I don't feel there's any substantive quality to the character.
Well, because think about it. I mean, we were just talking about connection between actors. The thing is, and I think it's really super cool what we're able to do with CG and everything. But I mean, you heard in the early stories when Ewan McGregor was like acting with a tennis ball because they were
Star Wars,
Star Wars, because he was surrounded, and he wasn't even talking to another human being. I mean, how can we tell? This is why, for me, I think for me, the itch that I have, I've been watching This Is Us, and Dan Fogelman he's just a genius at human relationship. And he just parks on one event and just says, the death of the father was the cataclysmic event of this family. And I'm going to spend the next 6 years
unpacking that.
Yeah. And I love how meditative. But then when you get, you don't notice it. I said to my wife, this is the craziest TV show ever. It's about one thing, the death of the father. and the impact that it had on every single one of the brothers and sisters and who they became. But think about how significant that is, even within. So I think for me, the itch is, even with Little Women, is I get overwhelmed by a lot of the spectacle. So for me, I try to remove as many things out of the way, which is good because we have like $5 for our budget. So I have like 4 pieces of furniture, some fabric, some lights. For me, if I can tell a story, if I can tell a beautiful scene between a boy and a girl with a chair, I'm happy all day long.
Yeah. It's good that you're good at economizing that way. I think it's nice to have a little bit of spectacle at times, isn't it? But
which I think is the beautiful yin and yang between you and I and what we bring to the environment.
But I think that it's just not always possible where we're at now in educational theater. But I think it's cool with the resources that we have. We learn to maximize. We're maximized, aren't we? Well, that's cool, dude. I love
Good hanging out with you, man.
I love hanging out. If you were to choose just one question, choose for the rest of your life again, would it be film or theater?
Theater.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Huh.
I got into film and TV, because I
Very cool.
thought that it was something different than what I discovered it to be. And by the way, it's my own limited experience. It's not a commentary on film. But I think for me, do you know what my little secret dream is?
What?
That when I retire, I audition for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Oh.
And once or twice a year, once every other year, I just go play some old king in some play. I just want to be the old codger, as you would say.
They do some great contracts up there, 3, 6, 9 month contracts.
It's my secret little dream is to do that and then go have some salted caramel ice cream over it.
Well, may the Lord bless you.
Thank you, man.
We would own a vacation home in Ashland then.
Come on. Listen, if you didn't get to listen to part 1 of the conversation where Fab and I explore our love of directing and what it means, be sure to check it out. Be sure to write that 5-star review, download, share, tell your friends about Story, where storytellers disrupt. We can't wait to see you again.
See you next time.